When it comes to fully electric vehicles, Nissan has been playing in this space for about 15 years with the original Leaf hatchback. If you guys can remember, the Leaf was one of the first mass-produced EVs to be offered here in the States, and globally it's been somewhat of a sales success. So for Nissan's second effort, the company took their time with their first electric SUV, the Nissan Ariya. I already had a chance to drive this vehicle out in California, and the specs on this car are relatively competitive on paper, up to 304 miles of range, and on the e-4ORCE all-wheel drive versions, up to 389 horsepower. So now that Nissan has finally loaned us an Ariya for a full week, this model here happens to be the fully loaded Platinum e-4ORCE Plus, which means we have the larger battery pack, the big question I answered. For those of you who are looking for a premium electric SUV that isn't a Tesla, how does the new Nissan Ariya e-4ORCE stack up? Stay tuned to find out. So before we start talking about the exterior styling of this particular Platinum Plus e-4ORCE trim, I thought I'd pop the hood and remind you guys what's powering this thing. Now, as you guys can see, there is no frunk, and that's kind of a problem because most of the Ariya's competitors do offer a small to medium-sized frunk storage. Now, underneath the hood, you're gonna find a lot of wires here and primarily a lot of componentry that could have been packaged into the interior. At least that's what Nissan says, but they've repackaged it here to give you more interior space, and that's why this vehicle doesn't have a frunk. And when the Ariya first came out, it launched with just a single electric motor, offering around 238 horsepower if you guys got the bigger battery pack. This particular one that I'm showing you here is the e-4ORCE model. It's the e-4ORCE Plus Platinum version, which means we have a second motor at the rear axle, giving this vehicle all-wheel drive. Total combined output is 389 horsepower and 442 pound-feet of torque. Those figures put it really high up in terms of, numbers. This has more power versus like the all-wheel drive version of the ID.4 or the Ioniq 5 or Kia EV6, minus the GT and the N versions, of course, and of course more power than the Subaru Solterra and Toyota BZ4X. Now, it all goes out through a single-speed reduction gear transmission. This model, having the bigger battery pack, uses an 87 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery pack. So that's good for up to 267 miles of range. If you guys go for the base battery pack and the Empower with front-wheel drive, that'll go only 205 miles of range. The Venture Plus front-wheel drive is the range leader at 304 miles. Now, Nissan quotes the 0 to 60 time at around 5 seconds for this e-4ORCE version. If you guys don't get the bigger battery pack, the power actually drops to 335 if you guys go for an e-4ORCE with the smaller 62 kilowatt-hour battery pack. The Ariya has a top speed of around 124 miles an hour. This vehicle can tow up to 1,500 pounds, and as this car sits, it weighs in at just over 5,000 pounds, or around 200 pounds heavier than the front-wheel drive version. But closing up the hood, let's go ahead and quickly talk about the charging for this vehicle. You can see the charge port door is located here on the passenger side front fender. And unlike the Nissan Leaf, this car comes with the CCS combo port for fast charging. It accepts up to 130 kilowatts, still uses the J1772 plug. Nissan will actually ship the car with an NAC adapter so you can charge this thing at Tesla superchargers. Eventually, the company will adopt the NAC plug, I believe, on 2025 model years. Now, the car has an onboard charger at 7.2 kilowatts, which means it's slow to charge even on a level 2. It'll take around 14 hours to go from 10 to 100% on a level 2, and I was able to confirm that it is definitely a slow charge. A lot of competitors have a 10 to 19 kilowatt onboard charger, which can just charge way faster than this car. In terms of DC fast charging, you can accept this will accept up to 130 kilowatts, which means you can go from 10 to 80% in about 40 minutes. So again, still slow, or quicker than the Leaf, but slower than a lot of its rivals, especially if you look at like the Ioniq 5, which can charge twice as fast. So I'm hoping that Nissan will eventually work on some kind of update to make the Ariya charge a lot faster, even though the range is competitive. But let's go ahead and talk about the exterior styling of this vehicle. You can see my particular tester is painted in this deep ocean blue exterior color with the black two-tone roof. The color itself definitely has a lot of metallic fleck in it. I'm sorry, the sun is covered up by all these clouds, so I won't be able to show you that, but you can see moving back from the vehicle, the styling is certainly distinctive as an EV and something a little more futuristic. Nissan calls it timeless Japanese futurism. You can see the headlights have this kind of rectangular LED design, which looks really modern and sophisticated. You have LED low and high beams, LED daytime running light and turn signal. And then unlike some EVs, I like the fact that Nissan still gives you an actual fog lights on the vehicle. There's some functional air intake openings there, or vents, and then you have a completely closed off grille with more functional openings down there. I believe this vehicle also has active grille shutters, but overall you can see the styling for me Kind of reminds me of like what the next generation Murano is supposed to look like, even though this is a compact SUV. Nissan again calls it timeless Japanese futurism. I think it's a little frumpy looking, but looks are always subjective. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think of the design. Now moving around the side profile, you can see this is where the car kind of just looks a little bloated in my opinion. My tester has the 19-inch wheels. You can also go for 20-inch wheels, an inch larger for no extra charge, and it's around 182.9 inches long with a 109-inch long wheelbase. So this is about the same size as a Nissan Rogue, but Nissan says it has the interior space of a Murano, so that's something to keep in mind. You can see the wheel arch trim is gloss black painted. These are the 19-inch wheels with the aerodynamic covers over it. If you go for the 20s, it drops the range by about 10 miles to 257. It's riding on a 235 by 55 R19 Bridgestone Alenza all-season tire. Go for the 20s, it'll increase the size to a 255 width tire. You have an all-independent suspension, no adaptive dampers. This vehicle, I believe, has around 7 inches of ground clearance, so it's not much for an SUV per se. Now you can see the Platinum trim also includes this nice kind of dark gray metallic finish along the window trim. You have these power folding mirrors, which also include a 360 camera. There's a integrated turn signal, black painted. My test car also has the roof, the black painted roof, along with the panoramic glass roof that also opens up, which is a nice touch. That's included when you guys go for the Empower trim and up, I believe. And then you can see looking at the rear from this angle, this is where I think the car has a little too much rear overhang. This is where I kind of wish the wheelbase was a little bit longer. And you're also noticing the windows back here are not tinted. So you can see the back window is not tinted along with this window right here. And that's because I guess the EPA, the government doesn't recognize this car as an SUV. They think of it more like a long roof wagon, which I guess it kind of is, but it's also relatively tall. So I'm surprised the windows are not tinted. Looking at the rear, you can see you have that signature or that kind of trendy light signature where you have a full-length LED light bar. Nissan is spelled out back here as opposed to the Nissan badge. You have LED turn signals, LED reverse lights, LED brake and tail lights. You can see the Ariya badge also has a different script than other Nissans, along with the Platinum e-4ORCE Plus badge, so it's a little bit too much badging for me. The spoiler also has some aerodynamic properties that allow air to kind of pass through here. I do like the way the spoiler is with the rear brake light, and you can see Nissan still gives you a rear window wiper, which is nice. The e-4ORCE model also has a more aggressive looking rear bumper over here, which definitely gives it a little bit more of a sportier edge. And then if you look at the cargo area, a hands-free activated liftgate is included, and you can see the Ariya, for a compact SUV, doesn't have much space when the seats are up. You get around 24 cubic feet of space just under that with the second row seats up. You can see there's a little bit of storage to each of the sides. If you lift this up, you can see there's a little bit of underfloor storage here. Along with just a fix-a-flat kit. This car doesn't have, with an air compressor, doesn't actually have a spare tire. Fold down the second row seats, it expands the cargo to around 59 cubic feet of space. So relatively competitive there, but considering that the Ariya is a little bit larger than some of its rivals, I expect a little bit more space. I believe the front-wheel drive model will include more underfloor storage, a deeper storage bin. This is where the rear motor did take up a little bit of underfloor space compared to the front drive model. So let's move on to the inside of this 2024 Nissan Ariya. Before we get inside, however, let me show you guys the key fob. You can see Nissan very recently updated their key fob, which is kind of like a small evolution of their previous fob, which was in need of a replacement. You can see I like the way it looks. I like the new Nissan logo, of course, the silver trim. It's a nice size key that feels good in your hands. It has the usual lock, unlock, power liftgate, and panic function. Nissan also offers your phone as a key. It's part of a dealer accessory for an additional $500. A lot of owners, I imagine, will add that. Now, unlike some competitors, you can see the Ariya has a very traditional pull-style door handle. It also has a walk-away auto lock and unlock feature. So if I have the key fob on me, I can walk away from the vehicle, it'll lock the doors. I can approach the car, it'll unlock the car doors as well. That is a system that you can turn on and off. When you lock the car, you can see the mirrors will also electrically fold in. It has that trademark Nissan beep. And if you touch the back of the door handle, that will unlock the door for you as well. Now, if you guys want the Platinum trim, I hope you guys like a bluish gray interior, because this is the only interior color combination available on the Platinum. It certainly looks good, especially with the dark blue exterior color. This is also the only way that you can get the Nappa leather seats. So you get, again, this upgrade when you go for the Platinum. I also love the way the seats look. They're also very comfortable and supportive with really nice padding. That's because Nissan uses their Nappa-inspired zero-gravity front seats for the padding material. You can see the leather is also high-quality feeling. I love the contrast stitching. These seats are also heated and ventilated. You have a 12-way power front driver's seat with 2-person memory on the driver and on the passenger side. So the passenger also gets an 8-way power minus the lumbar adjustment. but it's nice to see. If you guys want the heated and cooled seats with the memory seats, you have to go for this platinum grade trim as well. Now you can see the door panel materials are surprisingly nice. You have a soft touch injection molded plastic. There's some additional ambient lighting strips here for the platinum trim. I also love the suede Alcantara here, which is nice. You have a padded armrest over here. You have these gloss black accented window controls, with the window controls being up down for all four. That's a nice touch as well. These also are illuminated. You have this really interesting and-on ambient lighting, which also carries over from the door panel to the floor pan over there onto the other door panel. It certainly has an interesting look at night, although it's not quite as intricate as what you're going to find in like the EV6 or the Ioniq 5, for example. You also have a 10-speaker Bose stereo, which sounds fine if you guys are an audiophile. It's about average for the class. You can see down here there is a hard touch plastic material with a little bit more storage in the door pockets, which is nice. There's an e-4ORCE badge to let everybody know as soon as you enter the vehicle that you have an all-wheel drive version, which means you have a little bit more power. But overall, you can see it makes a really good first impression. Now, stepping inside, this is where the Ariya's low ground clearance makes you feel like you're stepping into a hatch or a wagon as opposed to an SUV. As I shut the door, you can hear the door actually has a really solid sounding thunk, so I really appreciate that. It adds to the impression of quality with this vehicle. You can see starting the car up, the start-stop button is located where you'd expect it to be via that power switch. If I turn the vehicle on, you can see it has power adjusting tilt and telescoping steering wheel, which is actually a really unique touch. You don't typically find a power tilt telescoping wheel in this segment. So again, that's an upscale feature that makes the Ariya feel a lot more expensive than it actually competes in. You can see in terms of the door or the dash materials, you have the same ultra suede that goes onto the dash here with that blue and the actual stitching, which is really, really nice. Above me here, this is all hard touch plastic, but you're not going to really touch that portion here. You can see the platinum grade also includes heads-up display. And then the steering wheel, it's a two-spoke design with a flat bottom wheel. No paddles for regen or anything like that, but you can see it offers a good amount of adjustability and range. To adjust the steering column, you have these gloss black actual buttons on the steering wheel to control the ProPilot Assist and your audio controls. The horn, it sounds appropriately sized, but nondescript. And then you can see all Ariyas will come with the kind of curved display here, where you have a 12.3-inch display here for the center stack with Nissan Connect, and then you have a 12.3-inch display here for the instrument panel. So this also includes wireless Apple CarPlay, but not wireless Android Auto. It's a wired connection for Android Auto. And then you can see there's this wood grain paneling here on the dash and on the center console here. The wood grain, Nissan tells us, is real, but when I actually start touching it and looking at it, it does feel like a fake material, but I'll take their word for it. You can see it has a nice look, especially when you have it with these haptic feedback touch sensitive buttons, which I think actually the fact that it gives you haptic feedback is a cool touch. It looks very futuristic and clean and modern. I also appreciate the volume knob here. You have your hazard control here, and you have your skip and forward buttons there for changing the song, of course. And then looking over here at the center console, there's a couple of nice futuristic touches here. Like, for example, I can push and hold this button, or I can move the center console forward and back. And then if I push this button here, you can see there's a nice little storage compartment that pops out. It's a perfect place to put my wallet or keys or cell phone, for example. There's a little lid that you can close up, although I will say that this feels pretty cheap. Don't love the feeling of that. Most of you will just leave it slid open anyways. But that's also, again, a pretty cool touch, how that kind of folds out of the way. And if you slide this back, you can see you'll find your two USB-C charging ports here, an A and a C, and you can see this also provides a little area where you can wrap cords around. There's a little bit of storage there for a phone. You have a 12-volt power outlet here, of course, and then looking at the infotainment system, you can see that's with the CarPlay connected. And the graphics definitely appear grainy, even on the CarPlay screen. And then if you guys notice, it's really laggy and slow. I don't love that. Like, you can see, touch that, come on. It's just, it takes forever for it to actually respond, and that's unacceptable because I've tested a lot of EVs like the new Chevrolet Equinox EV that has a really fast 17.7-inch display. It lacks CarPlay, but this is just embarrassingly slow for Nissan, so don't particularly love that. Like, let's go back to the native system here. Again, just check out how annoyingly sluggish that is. I'm literally trying to go back to the native system. You can see it's taking its sweet time, but as I'm scrolling through here, you can see the graphics in the native system also don't look particularly impressive as well. This car does have factory GPS, but you can see it's also a little bit on the slow side, and the graphics look fine. They look like they were appropriate maybe 10 years ago. This is where I think Nissan could be doing a better job. You can see there's the climate functions. If you want to access the heated steering wheel, you have to go into the screen here. That turns it on. If you want to access the ventilated seat controls, this is where you also have to kind of go out of this, and you can access them from right here. So this is where you're going to find your heated and cooled seat function, which the heated and cooled seat function works well, but I don't particularly love how it's in the screen, especially when the screen is this slow. So I think Nissan really needs to work on this, which, you know, should be an easy fix. So I'll be curious to see what they do for their next generation of software for their Nissan Connect head unit. If I put the vehicle into reverse, you can see there's your full surround view 360 camera with moving object detection. It has automatic emergency braking as well. But again, the graphics and resolution aren't fantastic. You also have an auto park feature. So again, nice touches, but it just doesn't look great when you have that screen and the terrible resolution. But you can see over here with the center stack, you can there's a nice lid here that closes up for the cup holders. This does feel sturdy. In terms of build quality, the build quality in here does feel nice. The cup holders are also good. The one thing I don't love with this moving center console, however, is the fact that, you know, you do have a nice padded center console here, but when I open this up, it's a very narrow storage bin. Like, literally, that's all I get for undercover storage here. That seems to me a little annoying. That's probably why Nissan offers the additional storage here. Wireless phone charging pad, as you can see, is right there. It fits my iPhone 14 Pro Max quite nicely. The seats are also very soft, comfortable, and supportive. They don't have much in terms of bolstering, but there is, again, a Nismo version coming that Japan just released, but it's not been confirmed for the US. That'll have more aggressively bolstered seats, but these are wonderful in terms of comfort, at least. If I open up the glove box, you can see the glove compartment is relatively deep. It goes into the dash. It's damped and lined with felt. I also appreciate the rose gold trim here. And then my test car here also has the digital camera rearview mirror. There's also a traditional mirror, but you can see with the camera style that gives you a better view of what's behind you. You can see there's also a woven material here, big panoramic roof that also opens up to vent air, which a lot of the competitors don't offer that. So if you want a roof that actually opens to let in air, the Ariya is one that certainly should make it to your list. But overall, as you can see, the interior of the Ariya certainly makes a great first impression. High quality interior materials, tons of interior space, comfortable seats, but the big sour point is that slow infotainment system, which I'm hoping Nissan will address with a software update. Now, moving to the back seat of the Nissan Ariya, this is where this car has a relatively good amount of interior space back here, especially if you need to use it for adults. Now, you can see the blue Nappa leather seats carries over back here, which is a nice touch. If I want, I can also fold the seats down to expand the cargo capacity. It actually creates a pretty decently flat floor, so that's nice for those of you who want to use this to actually carry longer items. The seats themselves also offer a slight recline. You can see it's a little bit reclined there compared to the other side, so that's a nice touch. And then getting back here, you can see the legroom space Nissan claims is around 37 inches of legroom, which, as I shut the door also has a solid sounding thunk and a completely flat floor here, and that's because this car is built on a dedicated EV architecture. Now you can see this is where I pretty much have the front seat to drive. At 5'7", I can easily get comfortable back here. You can also fit 3 people across, which is a nice touch. You do have the same high quality soft touch materials here and here, but none of that andon ambient lighting on the back seat door panel, just on the front seats. You can see it's nice and padded over here. Love the rear seat air vents with more of that wood grain trim here. You have 3 level heated seats on this trim, along with 2 USB-C charging ports. You have 2 storage cubbies here, which is a nice touch. And then if you fold this down, you have an armrest with 2 cup holders. In terms of the headroom space, you can see the sunroof here does take up a little bit of headroom space at 5'7". My head gets pretty close to the roof, so this is where a taller roof would have been nice to give you more headroom space. I also love how the suede carries over onto the B pillar here. That's a nice high quality touch. So overall, the interior of the back seat here has the same high quality materials, some nice features as well, and it also has around average amounts of legroom. Just remember, some competitors do offer an inch or 2 more rear seat legroom space, but this should be fine for most people. So it's been a little over a year since I had a chance to drive the Nissan Ariya, and this is actually the first time that I'm getting this car for a full week to test. I'm also really happy at the fact that Nissan basically sent me the top spec model, the Platinum Plus with the e-4ORCE powertrain, which means we have a second electric motor to the back axle, giving this vehicle all-wheel drive. For now, this is the most powerful way that you can get an Ariya. In Japan, Nissan just revealed the Nismo version with an extra 40 horsepower. No confirmation if that vehicle is coming to the States yet, but starting off the driving seat in this model, we are at a full charge. The vehicle was showing 334 miles on a full charge. We'll talk about the actual real-world range once I get later into the driving scene for this vehicle, but Nissan quotes the car at like 267, or at least the EPA quotes the car at 267. So it's a decent range number, and first impressions for the Ariya are relatively positive.
Canceling voice recognition.
The voice commands in this car also are kind of annoying, so I'm going to try to refrain from saying the manufacturer word. But let's go ahead and see what we can get 0 to 60 wise in our testing here. Again, we are in sport mode. We're at almost a full charge, and we're just going to floor it and see what we can get. Feels pretty soft off the line. Nissan has tuned it for more linear feel. 0 to 60 in 4.9 seconds. Oh, I said the N-word again. It's trying to see. No, stop. That's super annoying. 4.9 is around 0.3 seconds faster versus when I first tested this vehicle in California about a year ago when it was rainy conditions. So that time is perfectly acceptable. I think Nissan quotes the car. I think the company quotes the car at 5 seconds. So the 0 to 60 performance is average to slightly below average. I mean, it's going to be quicker versus like the e-4ORCE or the Solterra, for example, but the ID4 all-wheel drive should be pretty similar to this. The Ioniq 5 and Kia EV6 are going to be faster still. But it's still not a great, or not a bad time. I'll be curious to see, if Nissan ever brings the Nismo version here, it should be even faster. Let's try it again here. This time we're just going to brake torque it. It actually does respond to brake torquing. Feels quick. 5.23 there, so this is with it more going slightly uphill. But again, that performance is way better versus the front-wheel drive version of this car. So if you guys are looking for the quickest Ariya, the e-4ORCE model is definitely the way to go. But enough about 0 to 60 times. I mean, yes, they're fun, but you can certainly get faster ones. It's going to feel quick most of the times. In sport mode, in terms of the handling dynamics, the Ariya is definitely not sporty. That's where the Nismo version in Japan could come into play, where they've really tuned the suspension. This car's steering is numb and light and devoid of feel. The suspension is so softly tuned that I can literally feel the car wallowing about as I, just test out the steering feel in this car. The seats are pretty comfortable though. I do like the zero gravity Nappa blue-gray leather seats, which just feel really plush. They have a nice, nice padding to it. They don't really hold you in place. So if you're gonna do a lot of aggressive driving, that's where you kind of feel like you're flailing around in the seat. But the ride quality in this car is also an interesting point because we have a softly tuned suspension with the smaller 19-inch wheels. Now you can get this car with a 20-inch wheel on this Platinum trim. It's a no-charge option. I had a chance to drive the Platinum with the 20s in California. Here, back home, I just have the 19s, and the ride quality of this car is kind of schizophrenic. It's weird because on smoother pavement, it feels perfectly fine. It kind of floats about and feels soft, but then you hit a bump, and even with the 19s, I feel a lot of impact harshness coming through the suspension. It kind of crashes a bit. And it just feels, like the tuning, the damping needs some work to it because it's not the most well-controlled. I've definitely driven other EVs that feel a little bit more planted. They have a little bit better control, rebound control in the shocks. So I'm not entirely sure if it's a tuning thing or if Nissan needs to go to a new supplier for the shocks, but put my foot down here. I do like the sound. It's kind of like a spaceshipy, futuristic vibe, and that sound is more present when you're in sport mode, so you're gonna want it to be in that mode if you want more of that noise. I don't think that the company lets you turn the system on or off entirely, at least individually. When you're like in sport, if you want to turn it off, it's kind of just fixed into position. But put my foot down there, you can feel a slight delay, and I don't like that delay because I just hopped out of the Equinox EV, which is a direct competitor to this, and that vehicle for a front drive model didn't have any delay, and it actually felt quicker when you first punch it, even though I was only driving the front wheel drive model. The E-Step, which is Nissan's version of high regen braking. It's not a true one pedal drive because it actually doesn't bring the vehicle to a full stop. I have to step on the brake to kind of bring the vehicle to a stop when your speed drops below 5 miles an hour, which I don't particularly love. I mean, I love the wave of torque that you get. It has that like nice shove of power that feels like linear at the same time. It also feels a little bit laggy, but The one thing about the E-step function that I don't particularly love is the when it forces you to take over when you want to come to a full stop, the brake pedal feel in this car is spongy. A lot of Nissan vehicles have had that kind of spongy feel with the brake pedal, and I don't particularly love it. I also noticed that when the E-step is on, the brake pedal will move to the position that it thinks you're pressing it in if you were actually using the brakes. That's very similar to what Mercedes does, so surprised to see it here in this Ariya. I didn't realize that the company was also doing the same thing. It's also trying to do the same thing where it's thinking that I'm talking to it. Shut up, car. But overall, you know, once you get used to it and the spongy brake pedal feel, you can get, you know, smoother driving dynamics in this car, but, you know, combine that with the E-step and then the spongy brake pedal feel
interrupt the voice prompt
and the lack of, you know, feedback that you get from the brake pedal, from the steering. The drive is just very disconnected. It's very uninspiring, very not sporty. So that's kind of where I'm really hoping that the company will decide to bring the Nismo version of this car, because, you know, from a driving enthusiast perspective, this thing feels very much like a disappointment, just because the chassis and the steering and the brakes are all out of whack. But, you know, from a regular person, average Joe point of feel, like, you can see out of the car just fine. I can see out of the front, the side, the rear just nice. There's also a digital camera rearview mirror, which you can see. I don't love this rectangular square shape of it, but it kind of gives you a clearer, better view of what's around you. The infotainment system in this car is also a point of sour conversation because the graphics look pretty bad. I do like the way the instrument panel looks, but from the terrible voice commands to, you know, the navigation graphics and the slow response of the screen, it just needs work there. It needs a software update, something just to make it feel like as impressive as it looks, because when you get into this interior, it certainly looks nice. I also don't love the turn signal, how it returns to center. I would have just preferred it to kind of stay fixed into position when I signal left or right. It kind of just returns to center like an old BMW or an old Lexus. In terms of quietness, at least this interior feels pretty quiet. And then let's go ahead and talk about range, because on a full charge, this car was showing 334 miles. It's rated at 267. That's great from the trip computer. But I definitely noticed that the trip computer is a little optimistic. In my real world testing, I was averaging in perfect weather conditions around 280 miles of range. Now, that is a little bit better versus what the EPA states this car at 267. But when this thing was showing 334, I was like, I don't think so. That's not going to be great, because it was moving a lot faster when I was actually driving it in the real world for my real miles versus what the car is actually showing, you know, as it kind of cycles and lowers itself down when you're actually driving the thing. So 280 is not bad. But again, other competitors are going to show, you know, even more, over 300 miles of range in actual real world testing. So that's something to consider. But overall, I think if you guys are coming from a Leaf, this is going to feel like a huge improvement. I mean, it should, because it's 12 grand more expensive than a Leaf. But the problem is in this space, which accounts for 25% of EV sales, there's a lot of tough competitors, a lot of new competitors out there. So I think it's time for Nissan to consider, you know, or at least talk about what's coming for a refreshed version of the Ariya. So with just under 13,500 units sold here in the US in 2023, Nissan had a decent first year sales effort. This car actually outsold the Leaf by about 2 to 1, which isn't a hard thing to do. The Leaf has been really faltering in terms of sales here in the US over the last few years. So the Ariya is definitely a welcome addition in putting Nissan back on the map in terms of EVs, premium EVs. So after spending a full week with this fully loaded Ariya e-4ORCE Platinum Plus, what are my thoughts here? I mean, obviously the car in terms of looks is not personally my favorite, but looks are always subjective. In terms of the range, you guys saw I got around 280 miles in my actual real world testing, which is better than what the EPA claims, but also the range calculator on the car was a little too optimistic for my taste as well. Acceleration 0 to 60 in just under 5 seconds is perfectly fine. Obviously it's quick, but if you're used to driving a lot of other EVs, this is going to feel a little bit sluggish because of the way Nissan tunes the power delivery of this EV system. I really wish that Nissan would just give us the full power, especially in sport mode, as soon as my foot goes right to the floor. That's not going to matter, of course, for those of you who don't care about acceleration and straight line speed. In terms of the ride quality, this is where I didn't love the Ariya, because at some times it was like a perfectly floaty and soft ride, and then at other times on crappier roads, it just crashed a little bit too much for bumps. So I imagine the 20s are also going to make it even worse. So this is where I think Nissan needs to do something about the suspension tuning. They need to upgrade the software for the infotainment system, because even though it includes wireless Apple CarPlay, although Android Auto is wired, the graphics and resolution and just the speed of the system is just really slow and laggy, and I didn't really appreciate that, along with the wonky voice commands that didn't always work well. This is where the Ariya, again, needs an update. Mostly a software software update to improve the charging speed, improve the software and the technology and the infotainment system, and also adjust the ride quality, which again, that's going to be more of a hardware change. The beauty about the Ariya, however, is the fact that Nissan did lower the price for 2024, so that certainly made it more appealing. All trims across the line are around $4,000 cheaper at the base end, $6,000 cheaper at the high end. So if you guys want to get into a base Ariya with front-wheel drive and the smaller battery pack, pricing is now going to start at $39,500, which is again almost $4,000 less versus the 2023 version. That's a pretty enticing deal. If you guys want all-wheel drive, it'll cost you around $4,000 more. That's with the smaller battery pack. The bigger battery pack will cost you around $2,500 more. Now, my particular test car here is the fully loaded Ariya Platinum Plus e-4ORCE, which means pricing for this model is around $54,000 plus destination, with the color upcharge, and my particular test car here comes to around $56,500, including destination. So again, that's around $6,000 less versus last year where it was around $62,000. Obviously, that's way more enticing, and it's also more competitive with competitors like the ID4, the Ioniq 5, the EV6, the Tesla Model Y. So I'm glad to see that Nissan lowered the price, and there's also relatively strong lease deals available, but I do think that for similar money, there are competitors out there that I just find more appealing, but that doesn't mean you should dismiss the Ariya. Just make sure you take a lot of its main competitors out there. There are certainly still a lot of strengths of this vehicle, like the very comfortable seats, for example, but I do think that for the money, there are also other choices out there. But with all that said, hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on the brand new 2024 Nissan Ariya. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.